Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Hearld-Tell.
Welcome to Hearld-Tell. Okay, we're going to go to Huntington, West Virginia, the opioid crisis in West Virginia, a local reporter with the Hearld-Dispatch in Huntington, West Virginia. Courtney Hessler, how are you, ma'am? Thank you so much for your time today.
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Let's start bigger picture, though, because these things, what happens is we start talking data and we start talking buzzwords and we start talking stereotypes, and everybody kind of loses perspective of what's going on. Tell people who don't know, I've lived and worked there, you're from there. Talk about the people and the city of Huntington and kind of put a human face on it for me.
Well, Huntington, your listeners probably know as best, like it's where Marshall University is located. Marshall, and it's kind of a saying that is getting old, but Huntington lives and dies with Marshall University. That's the center of it. Your listeners have probably heard of it from We Are Marshall, the major motion picture. But Huntington was built on the Ohio River. It's an industrial town, or it was, and as those jobs declined, so has our population, and we're kind of seeing an effect from that. West Virginia has a history of really hard-hitting jobs, labor jobs, and because we work hard, our body hurts more, and because of that, we've had to turn to medical help, and that's all started with opioids being prescribed. It goes back to the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma and their promotion of opioids. In about 2007, a flood just started, is how people are describing it, of opioids being sent into our area. Over a 7-year period, 7 or 8 years, Huntington received about 80 million pills from just 3 opioid distribution companies, AmerisourceBergen, McKesson, and Cardinal Health. And that rage, the flood, just continued to increase until 2012, when the DEA really caught on, and the regulation belts were tightened more, and the drastic to their legal doctor prescriptions to turn to illicit drugs on the street. And that was 2012. We're 10 years later, and we're still suffering. Overdoses continue to rise each year. We did get some headway before the crisis started, the pandemic started, but because the pandemic cut off so many connections, personal connections that have been made to get people the help that they needed, that really just caused it to aggravate again. So we're sitting here today, and our people are suffering, our people are still dying, and we really just have no end in sight.
What was it about this particular area? Because like you said, there was other parts of the country down in the coal fields. I know Oceana was a hot spot for this, where you got, I forget, someone got, you have a town of 2,000-3,000 people, and they had hundreds of thousands of these pills thrown in there.
Yeah.
Was there a particular reason for this area that ever came out, either in the trial or in the supposition or just in some of the reporting y'all have done? Why Huntington? It's a smaller
Right.
size city. Is there a specific reason why? I know you went through the background of West Virginia, and some of
Yeah.
that comes from kind of the mining and the mill. There's an old, huge steel producing area there between there and neighboring Asheville to
Right.
Kentucky. Why Huntington though? What made this such an epicenter for all of this?
It's so multifaceted. Like it's ridiculous. You could account for anything. But one thing that really stuck out to me in the complaint that the city of Huntington and Cabell County had filed against the opioid firms, one line really stuck out to me, and I can't remember the specific number, but it was about the marketing practices of Purdue Pharma and yeah, their marketing consulting company, McKinsey, and it was something like the Huntington and Cabell County area received like, it was like 30 times the amount of marketing that other areas received. So for every dollar that was going into opioid marketing in other communities, in our area, it was like 30 times that. And I really think that that's what it goes back to.
So the theory on this was that got kind of interesting and got the national attention. What you've been reporting on for the last few years
Yeah.
is Huntington and Cabell County, which Huntington's in Cabell County, it's by far the majority of the population.
Right.
They decided to kind of do this novel thing where they went out on their own and went to court against the pharmacy companies, the big three pharma, they call them. What was the thought process for there? I know the model was kind of the tobacco settlements of years past, but locally, what was the thought process of they going, hey, we're going to go this alone and try this novel approach?
Well, for Huntington and Cabell County, I've really come to the term like Cabell County and Huntington kind of walked. So the 2,500 plaintiff cities and counties who have joined in similar claims nationally could run. So they were on the forefront. They were one of the first lawsuits that were ever filed. And I think it all comes back to a local attorney called, his name's Paul T. Farrell Jr. His dad's a circuit court judge here too. And he just had this notion that he was sick of it and he wanted to do something about it. And he might be one of the smartest people that I ever know. Like I can barely comprehend his mind or his thought processes. It's brilliant, but he was sick of it. He knew his town and his hometown was hurting, and he wanted to do something to fix it. And we just got lucky enough that he's from here, and this is where he wanted to start his journey.
Yeah, Courtney Hessler from Huntington joining us, a reporter, fine journalist. Make sure you're following her. Her information's on the lower third there, and we're going to link to these pieces in the show notes. Okay, they took it to trial, the big three pharma. This has been a long, arduous process. There's multiple, I don't want to call them side cases, but when you have a case this big, people join it. Some parts of it have been split off. There's been some judicial review things where they've had to split it off into different cases. But over the 4th of July weekend, we had kind of a big deal ruling that got a lot of attention, might have got lost to some folks because of the holiday. Just walk it through us for a minute, though, because one of the major pieces of what they were shooting for here, the judge basically struck down.
Yeah. So last year, Huntington and Cabell County became the first to go to trial in those 2,500 cases or so against the distributors in federal court. It lasted all through last summer. It was months long. And every single detail about how the opioid epidemic started and how it got to where it is today was shared. And it ended in the end of July, and we hadn't heard anything since. And the judge, late 4th of July, he dropped the opinion on it that essentially ruled against the plaintiffs in every single aspect that they had claimed. They claimed that the distributors had blindly just shipped pills in without doing their due diligence to check records, pharmacy records, that they promoted this, that they encouraged it. They just turned a blind eye because they were going to be profiting off of it. And the judge just disagreed with them completely. He said, it's really sad that our state's facing this, that the country is facing this, but the public nuisance law does not protect us from that.
We talk about, I know the mayor said that when this ruling came out that this was a blow to accountability. That's the word he used.
Yes.
This is such a big problem, though. I know they want the fiscal restitution because, obviously that would be a major amount of money. And
Right.
Huntington, unlike some other areas, they actually have infrastructure in place that this money could get put in the right hands immediately, which is often the problem in other places. Like, well, who do you send the money to? There's nowhere. That's not Huntington. If people's watched the documentary, they have the drug courts going. They have the second chance programs. They could use this money in an effective way because they're a major city. But isn't the bigger piece of that, besides the money, they just wanted on paper what was done to them. You're there, you're in that community, you've had this affect you on a personal level. It's part of the West Virginia mythology of those of us that grew up there. We're always kind of the underdogs and the mistreated. Isn't a lot of this just getting it on paper somewhere of like, look, we have to listen to all these pillbilly jokes. This was done to us. This wasn't something we chose, and we want it on paper and we want it on the record for posterity.
You said accountability, and that's a big part of this case. One of the most heartbreaking parts of the trial for me last year was whenever they revealed emails from CEOs of these companies who were rewriting the Beverly Hillbillies theme song to include pillbillies, about like West Virginia Appalachians, like going down the Pillbilly Highway to Florida to get prescriptions for pills, and just jokes like that. And to see somebody that's making millions of dollars a year sit there while Appalachians are dying is just heartbreaking for me. You're from here, Appalachians have a long history of being exploited, and this is just another blow to that.
Yeah, it sure is. Courtney Hessler joining us. She is from the Hearld-Dispatch in Huntington, West Virginia. Great local reporter, talking about the court cases, the opioid crisis, putting a familiar face and name to it. We're going to talk more about that pillbilly thing in just a second. Also, we're going to go through some of the stereotypes. Even though this court case got complicated and they didn't get to find out, there's some really important information that came out in this case. We're going to detail that with her. Going to take a quick break, return, continue with her on Heard Tell right after this.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to Heard Tell, an important conversation, one near and dear to my own heart. Y'all know how West Virginia I am. It's right behind me every single episode. I'm actually wearing the shirt today. I apologize to her, though, because she's a Marshall girl. But hey, same team for this one. Like, as long as they're not playing each other, we try to pull for each other. Especially now that Coastal Carolina is going to be up there more often. We'll be doing that. Courtney Hessler joining us from the Hearld-Dispatch in Huntington, West Virginia. Great local reporter. Please follow her work. Let's start right back up with that pillbilly thing, because when that happened, I wrote about it, because that got me hard. And the way I opened my piece on it was like, okay, I thought I'd heard every West Virginia joke there was. And you got to remember, when I went to basic training for the Air Force, they called room to attention to give me my first pair of shoes and all that. And, second cousins, and it's a toothbrush instead of a teeth brush. I thought I'd heard it all until this pillbilly thing.
Right.
Boy, that one cut. Was it the same for you when you heard these? And there was a lot more to that. They actually, that was not like a one-liner. It was a theme. Break that down and how that was received in the community.
Well, it was definitely one of my most read stories. That's for sure. I remember I got the email the day before my best friend's wedding, and I was the matron of honor. And I'm like, well, this might be a little bit more important to work on right now. But it's jokes that we kind of make among ourselves, but when someone, a big old CEO, is sitting in his office and sending emails back and forth or whatever, it's just like, you can't make jokes like that. You haven't lived the pain and suffering that we have lived. It's not funny. I grew up around opioid abuse and mental health issues, and I have PTSD from it that still affects me every day. So hearing and seeing that email it's just, it still like irks me to my core today. And I know that the defendants were found not liable in this certain instance, but it's things like that that are, I just think, make the trial so important to have happened still.
Yeah, I was talking to our friend Dr. Keith Humphreys, and the way he phrased it when it comes to the money is essential, but it's not standalone. And when you're talking
Yes.
about the stereotypes, yeah, it's funny stuff. But in this particular case, when you're trying to get funding for things, when you're trying to put a human face on things to raise awareness, to get funding at the federal level and the state level and from the charity folks and all this, those stereotypes are it's not an exaggeration. Those stereotypes can kill people
Yes.
because it dehumanizes. And once you start dehumanizing, now it's just an addict laying over there. What do we care? And it's not, no, that's a family member. And these are little, you can talk about this in
Yeah.
Huntington, especially people that watch the documentary on the drug courts. An addict is not just hurting themselves. These are bombs that go off in families and communities and cities and principalities that absolutely have a blast radius. And those stereotypes make that blast radius worse.
I think it's important to note too that these are the voices that were left out of the trial. The judge didn't hear from any personal stories from family or somebody who is suffering from substance use disorder. And I think, I'm not sure if that would have changed his opinion any, but these people want their voices to be heard. And in this instance, in the settlement with Purdue Pharma that's being worked on right now, it's just continuous that these personal stories are being left out of the courtroom.
I understand legally why they have to do things like that. But when you did the reporting on this, when you talked to lawyers, when you talked to the people that have actually been in the courtroom for this thing, were they surprised by this? Was it kind of out of nowhere? Some people are reading into the fact that he did this over the 4th of July weekend because obviously, the publicity on this was going to be hot. What was the overall reaction from the people, not just the public, the legal people, the folks that actually know how these things go?
Well, I can't get any of the attorneys to talk to me. So I think that's because they have confidentiality, contracts signed and all that. But I do know that in my discussions with them over the last year, they've all been feeling positive about it. They felt like it was going to be a great outcome for them. They weren't sure what the amount of money was going to be, but they really felt like they left it all on the table. Now, I don't think, any good attorney knows that nothing is for certain. So they had to think that this was a possibility to have happened, but I don't think that any of the attorneys I've talked to felt like there was any more that they could have presented to the judge.
Yeah, now that's the criminal trial, or the civil trial. That's the legal side of this. You brought up something in your tweeting as you were kind of summarizing the last few days as you processed all this. You have to talk about the government side of this. We've talked about the community. We've talked about the legal part of this. Where's the state and local government fall into this? Because again, it's not accidental this happens in West Virginia. What has their role been in this crisis?
Well, our state attorney general, Patrick Morrissey, has his own cases going. It's so complex. It's really hard to break down into a single podcast, but there's several other cases that were supposed to go to trial. All the cases filed in state court against the distributors was set to go to trial Tuesday. And because of the ruling coming out on the 4th of July, they decided to meet Tuesday and just push back those cases indefinitely. There has been talks that a settlement is in the works, but again, I can't get any of the attorneys to tell me if that's happening or not. So I'd hate to confirm that. But in the end, Cabell County and Huntington will still get nothing out of that. But it could be a big windfall for the state. They have, our Attorney General Morrissey is working on setting up a fund through the state legislature that will describe where all this opioid settlement money will have to go in the future. And that way, like back in the 90s, when there was the tobacco settlement that went to, it was a very large settlement that was supposed to help people stop smoking cigarettes. It went to fix roads or infrastructure issues. So at least we have something like this in place that will make sure that the opioid money goes toward actually helping people with substance use disorder and their families.
The other part of this was that even though this may not be the successful conclusion to some of these court cases, a lot of folks think the information that has come out of this,
Yes.
there's other defendants and plaintiffs. There's
Yes.
going to be more cases. We already talked about this. Has kind of been a shattering windshield thing where we chipped it and now there's all these branches going off it.
Yeah.
A lot of the experts studying this think the information that has come out of this is actually going to lead to more going forward. Talk about that for a minute. You talked about it as well. This is not the end. This is more the end of the middle of the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's so much information that came out of this trial that we would have never known if it wouldn't have taken place. And for the Pillbillies emails that we have already talked about, just all the details, hearing an expert, I feel like I could have another college degree just by all the information I heard. It helped me heal too, just from being around this my entire life and hearing, it's not necessarily my caretaker determined for her, but also the Hearld-Dispatch, the HD Media, who owns us, and the Washington Post found out that the DEA keeps a database of all the pills that are being shipped to various places from the time that they're created and until the time that you ingest it. And so that data was turned over as part of this lawsuit, and we were able to fight in federal court to get that information released. The Washington Post has a great database of it. If you just Google where did the pills go, Washington Post, you'll be able to find it. But we fought for that information to be released, and it really showed the details of the pills that just flooded into our communities. And we wouldn't have been able to find that and get that information to the public without this case.
Yeah. Courtney Hessler joining us from Huntington, West Virginia. Great local reporter. We'll link to that in the notes as well so folks can find that. Let's round back to where we started. Again, these things get lost really quick in legal terminology. They get lost quickly in stats and stereotypes and buzzwords. Let's go back to that personal face of this. You've made no bones in your public media and your writing how personal this gets for you. Let's not even pretend there's not bias here, because there's no way you can't be, because you live here.
Yes.
Start there and kind of round this out that, yes, this phase of it's over, but I know it's disappointing. You've talked openly about your disappointment with how that goes. Where does it go from here? Because like you said, Huntington, the documentary, if people haven't watched it, we'll link to that as well. They've got some innovative stuff going on. They're having funding problems. It's not getting any better, but they seem to be able to at least start figuring out how they're going to fight this going forward. Give us some positives out of kind of this dark tunnel we're in right now.
Well, Huntington and Cabell County have a $2.6 billion plan to abate the entire opioid crisis in our community within 15 years, which that seems like a long time, but the plan is so thorough and so well thought out. It's made by so many different parties in our community that it's exciting to think that we have an answer of how to fix it. We just have to figure out where is that money coming from. And so whenever Huntington and Cabell County filed this lawsuit, it didn't just include the distributors. Huntington and Cabell County were kind of a guinea pig to go to trial against the distributors first, and for the rest of the 2,500 or so lawsuits that were filed. And we know how that worked out. So now the next step, of course, they're going to appeal this and see what they can do in a higher court. But they still have lawsuits pending against doctors who prescribe the medicine, many of who have died already. They have lawsuits against manufacturers, pharmacies, and just everyone from the bottom up who was involved with starting and fueling this crisis.
Yeah. Courtney Hessler, great reporter. Let folks know where they can follow you. We're going to have you back on the show real soon with some of your other local reporting. Maybe we can talk some Marshall football when that goes down.
Yeah.
We're getting a new baseball stadium. That'll be kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, long needed. And that old CSX yard was an eyesore. That was kind of the dead spot when you drove past the football stadium and tried to get to the rest of town. We'll get you back on until we have you back on the program. Though, let folks know where they can follow you, let them know where they can follow the paper, and let them know where they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, so I'm really big on Twitter, and you can follow me at Hessler HD on Twitter, or you can follow the newspaper at Hearld-Dispatch. So it's pretty simple, or Hearld-Dispatch.com.
Yeah, they do good work. It's a very interesting little corner of the country.
Yeah.
I enjoyed living there. Marshall's a great school. We give it a little hard time when you. The old joke, of course, is WVU was the state school, Marshall was the private school. It's a lot different now.
Right. Yeah.
With it, healthy, friendly, brotherly rivalry. Nothing wrong with that. Courtney Hessler, thank you so much for the time today. I know it's a dark topic. Sometime when you're writing on something uplifting, let us know. We'll make sure to get you on that and balance it out. But thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I can't wait to be back.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.